Hi, this is Eddie Hearn, and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, proudly sponsored by Spartans Law. We're here in Bethnal Green, and I'm delighted to be joined by former world champion and now boxing punditry, Mr. Barry Jones. Barry, good afternoon, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you? All good?
Very well, thank you for asking, Barry. I know we're a bit pressed for time, so we're just going to jump straight into it. Just want to get your reaction on Anthony Joshua weighing in at his career heaviest so far. What did you make of the weigh-in, and how do you think AJ looks going into tomorrow night's crunch fight against Jermaine Franklin?
Well, I think it shows intent that he's going to be aggressive again, because let's be honest, the last few fights he tried to box a little bit more, which is the sort of right idea, but it's taken away a bit of his magic. Where he wasn't raw aggression, but he was always positive with his attacks and his movement. I guess with the added weight, and with Franklin not being, though Franklin's heavy, but not being the biggest of heavyweights in stature, that he's going to maybe try and push him back with the punches, which is what we want to see from Anthony Joshua, of course.
I mean, obviously it's his first fight under Derek James. We know Derek has a very good reputation in boxing, but it's also a must-win fight. But is it also a case of where AJ needs to look as good as possible, rather as just getting the win as well?
Especially in the heavyweight division, a win elevates you to possibly a world title again, because that's how that division works. But I do think it's important that, for the public's perception of him, that he has a good performance. I think Franklin's a good fighter, and he is a good fighter, and he showed that against Dillian Whyte, but Dillian Whyte is not the fighter that he once was, and I think he was on the slide, Dillian, before the Tyson Fury fight, maybe Povetkin too. Even though he won that fight, I think there was signs of decline slightly from him. He's still a good fighter, but not the one he was, and so I think that maybe flattered to deceive maybe for Franklin slightly. So I think Joshua, if he's positive, behind a solid jab, which you would tend to think with Derek James, because they are all quite aggressive but thoughtful fighters, Errol Spence and Charlo, just two for example, then that he'll be assertive with his work, and he'll need to be. I think if he boxes like the Joshua we've seen recently, within the Ruiz 2 and the 2 Usyk fights where he tried to be more thoughtful with his work, then a fighter who comes in from a low angle and punches up like Franklin will cause him a few problems.
Third fight under a third different trainer. Now, we all know Anthony's teamed up with Derek James. What will Derek look to do different, and what type of an approach would you see AJ like to take in probably what is like the sort of final stages of his career right now?
I don't know what he'll do. I think he'll want him to be confident in the Silverwood pocket. I think he'll want him to block and counter with his shot, so he'll want him to keep it, which is luckily for him that he keeps his shape quite well, Anthony Josh. That was his strength, one of his strengths. Hands high, always tucked in, works behind a solid jab. That's what he used to be like. And I think that he'll want that, but he won't want him to step out of distance too much. He'll want him to be every movement with the thought of punching off that movement. So if he slips to the right, to the left, he comes back with a left hook. If he steps to the right or slips to the right, he comes back with a straight right hand. And I think he'll want that. And certainly when Franklin throws a punch, he'll want Joshua to fire back. So blocking and hitting with the same hand. And also, Spence, Charlo, especially Spence, fantastic body punches, and I think if he can get that into Joshua's game as well, when they've got a smaller guy comes close, if you can whack him on the belly, then that's always a plus.
What are the channels that you feature on regularly? Boxing ID, shout out to Boxing ID, one of the best channels in boxing right now on YouTube. Yeah. So Barry says, they released an interview yesterday with Alex Krassyuk, and Alex did confirm it was his side, Team Usyk, that pulled out negotiations for a huge mega undisputed showdown between him and Tyson Fury. What happens next in this heavyweight division? A lot of people say they expect Alexander Usyk to face his mandatory opponent, which is scheduled to be Daniel Dubois. But what does the WBC heavyweight champion do next in your mind, Barry?
By the looks of it, what he wants to, and I think that's the problem with the sport. Listen, Tyson Fury's been a revelation. He's been fantastic and he's brilliant. And every time he boxes, I love to watch him, except for the Derek Chisora fight, which I wasn't interested in. But apart from that, he's always great to watch. But he shouldn't be running the show. And no boxer should. The sport should be running the show, I think, and boxers should, as powerful as they are, and that's great for them, but they should have to abide by the rules and regulations. But it's a sad thing that we thought, though the fight was never signed. All this, I think we get too much information too soon. There was negotiations, and they didn't. And no, years ago, those negotiations would be private, and we would be none of the wiser about a potential Usyk and Fury fight. Now we felt like it was happening. and it was never really happening. So we get disappointed, we look at the point the fingers, I don't care who's to blame. It's not happening, let's forget about it. The disappointment is, from possibly having that fight, to having Usyk versus Daniel Dubois. Nothing against Daniel Dubois, but that's not a competitive fight, I don't feel. Unless Dubois catches him, which nothing points to that. And Fury against, well, someone like Manuel Chad or something like that. How inspiring is that? It's a play fight for him, and so if that were to happen, and I don't know, I'm just making these things up. If they were to happen, then it doesn't look good for the sport.
You mentioned the word control, and you felt as if Tyson Fury tried to sort of control the whole situation between him and Alexander Usyk. Do you think that's maybe one of the reasons why Team Usyk sort of pulled out of negotiations, because they felt as if they weren't getting the respect on their side, given the fact that Usyk does hold the majority of the belts in this heavyweight division right now?
He holds the majority of the belts, but A-side, people don't understand A-side. A-side is not the guy who's the better fighter. It's not the guy who has the most belts. A-side is the more commercially viable opposition or proposition, and that is Tyson Fury. You can argue that Usyk's been in bigger pay-per-views, but he hasn't been the A-side in those. Anthony Joshua's been the A-side in those. So that's where it starts to muddle a little bit. So you can understand Fury going, listen, this is my show, I'm the draw, as good as you are and as competitive as you are, you've been my hardest test and blah blah blah, and you deserve a big share of the pie. I'm still the draw. But you're talking about so much money, and I understand you don't want to leave a penny on the table, but now you've missed that huge payday. You might get another pay. The trouble is he can box Fury opposition and box 3 times rather than once and earn the same amount or maybe more, and he might want to go to that. And I worry about Fury's ambition, because he's brilliant and he's good enough to beat anyone on his day. I mean, he's clearly the best heavyweight on the planet, and he is. And Usyk's right behind him, but I think Fury has to be number 1. But I don't know whether he wants to. I think after those 3 Wilder fights, where they were 3 risky fights. Certainly, the first one was a risky fight to take. It's coming back from what he come back from, and with no real preparation with the opposition he'd faced. And the second fight being a blowout, and the third fight being a fantastic fight where he boxed a different way. He probably feels that he's ticked the box now, then he doesn't have to do any more work, and everyone should come to him, and he should be able to do what he wants. And I'm not criticising him for that, but I think the WBC should be stronger in their position, as should all the other organisations maybe with theirs, and say, listen, if you fight your number 1 contender. I don't know who the number 1 contender is for the WBC. I know the IBF is Hrgovic, WBA is Dubois. WBO, I don't know who the WBO is. Joe Joyce, there you go, of course, yeah, it is. And the WBC is, I don't know. I don't really take any notice of it anymore, because it almost doesn't seem to matter, does it? Because they just fight who they want to fight anyway. And that's the problem. It's a good thing for the fighters, I understand that, but it's a problem for the sport that then they get to dictate the terms about where they fight, and a more marketable fight gets pushed ahead of a more even and competitive fight. Because whether you can draw 1 million buys or you only box in empty arenas, if you work your way up to number 1, then you should get your opportunity, regardless. That's how the sport should be, on a fair scale. Otherwise, it's only people who with a bigger social media following get an opportunity. And then we start complaining about Jake Pauls and KSIs and all those, but we're doing that sort of thing, but with real boxers, only allowing the more commercial viable boxers to get an opportunity. So you have to. It should be about talent and ability and beating the right people to get to the opportunity to get the title shot. And that was a fucking rant and a half.
Last but not least, Barry, before I let you go, I just have to get your thoughts on the British Boxing Board of Control saying that they wouldn't approve a fight between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn outside of the UK. Very, very unexpected, but it is what it is. What does Chris Eubank Jr. do next, and how does Conor Benn sort of manage to move away from this situation? Because given by what a lot of people have said on social media, there's still a number of people that believe Conor's not innocent, and they aren't willing to forgive him until they see some sort of real proof to prove his innocence. Yeah, first of all, I don't think it is. It's not surprising, I don't feel, because they have to grant all their boxers permission to box abroad, so they won't, because they don't see Conor as vindicting himself or clearing his name yet. So I understand that, but that doesn't mean that fight won't happen, by the way. It might very well happen. Conor thinks a funny one, because you want to believe that he's innocent. You want to believe what he's saying. And and I don't know him double well, but like a lot of people who've met him, or met him a few times, it was a shock to think that he was taking or
failed a test. That was the truth. But you can. Facts are facts, and that's what's happened. And if he does have proof to clear his name, it just blows my mind, and everyone's, and yours as well, why he just doesn't go to the boxing board and do that. If you want to sue the boxing board, then do it. Clear your name first, then do it. I would say that, because then you put a full stop under it, and all this hearsay and conjecture all disappears. It all just goes away, and you can box. You can just clear your name and still never box here again. But do it for your peace of mind, so people just leave you alone, because that's a stain that's going to be on him for the rest of his career until he does what the evidence he says he has, until he produces that. I think it's going to be a stain in his career, which is a shame, because his career was flying, and he might still want to be a successful boxer in another country, but it's always going to be with him. I know if he can put that to bed, like other fighters have who failed tests. Roy Jones, Shane Mosley, Evander Holyfield, all these great fighters have had issues with drug tests, but they've taken their bans, or they've admitted to it, or whatever, whether they didn't know what they were doing, or whatever their reasons or excuses were. It got done. They had this 6-month ban, like Canelo, with the meat and all. But he's not the first one, by the way, and there's many others. But it don't get brushed under the carpet. It gets dealt with. But unless I've never known an uproar like this one ever. And I think he's made it worse by just not going, I didn't take drugs, but it's obviously in my system, I don't know how it's happened. Just say that. Don't say it's not in my system. No, you've got to go with what it is. Unless you can prove the tests were done falsely. And if you can, just fucking do it. And when everyone, I think more people want him to be innocent. Everyone who loves the sport wants him to be innocent. Everyone wants him to prove everyone wrong. Of course we do. We don't want any people who are knowingly taking drugs in the sport. Though we know loads of people who take drugs in the sport, or we don't know, we have an idea, possibly, but if he got the evidence, he can clear his name. It just sounds crazy why he doesn't do it, and he does it, and he can box wherever he wants, and we're all happy to watch him, and that's how it goes. But the sport nowadays is just a free-for-all madness, and I can't keep my finger on the pulse anymore. So I just literally concentrate on when a fight's announced, genuinely announced, I worry about that. And look at that, we're all talking about Conor Benn, we're not talking about Devin Haney versus Lomachenko, you know what I mean? Ryan Garcia versus Tank Davis. These great fights that are happening, we're not talking about those. And it's a shame, because that should be our sole focus on those brilliant fights that are going to happen in the next few months. And all we're talking about is this guy.
But for a number of years, it did seem like that sort of new four king horses era. Garcia, Tank, Lomachenko, Haney. It seemed as if we weren't getting that fight, but within the space of a month, 4 of the best fighters have just announced their next fight, and obviously it's in that division. Is that division sort of set an example to the rest of the division that we need the best fights and we need them now rather than later when fighters are sort of moving out of their prime?
Yeah, it is. And see, you get them with the lighter weights, because they're getting paid loads of money, millions, but they're not getting tens of millions, like the heavyweights.
Sorry, Barry, to disturb you, but do you think these, again, the likes of the Tanks, the Ryan Garcias, the Haneys and the Lomachenkos, do you think they've sort of looked at the mud that boxing's been in over the last sort of 2 to 3 months and thought, do you know what, it's time to sort of knuckle down now, let's give the 50-50 fights to the fans and let's sort of get our careers intact, because it is a short career in boxing.
It'd be lovely to think that, but no, they're just thinking these are the fights where I can earn money. So, like I said, go back to Tyson Fury or a heavyweight. What's Joshua in for this fight? I heard 10 million on the other day. I don't think it's that much, but if he's earning 10 million for boxing Jermaine Franklin, who's an unknown quantity really, the money's ludicrous. Like, it's just too much money for any one person to earn. The same with Fury and all the rest of them. But Lomachenko's won't earn tens of millions, but they earn millions boxing each other. So they've got to fight each other to get that sort of money, that life-changing money. And they want to fight each other. So it's in the lighter weights, they have no choice but to meet, which makes these fights easier to make. Because with all the egos, ultimately, if you want that 7-figure payday, you've got to get involved. Where the heavyweights can go to an easier route and just box two times a year or 3 times a year rather than twice or once to get it. And that's the difference, unfortunately. So I think boxers have got paid too much. I'd hate to say this because I'm an ex-boxer, I want boxers to get paid fortunes, but they get an over-market value for fights that are not worth it. So then when they get a fight that's meaningful, they want too much. Spence and Crawford's a fine example. That's a fight that could happen. It's a big money fight, but if Crawford got $10 million, if he did, for boxing Avanesian, which is Avanesian deserved his opportunity, by the way, for the world title shot. But if he got that for money for that, was it some new company who got involved?
Yeah.
BLK or something.
BLK, yes,
No.
yes.
And but if then what's he going to want for Spence? He gets paid. He got too much for a routine defence, which is always going to be relatively easy for him. It's because he's so brilliant on Avanesian's problem. But a Spence fight where he could genuinely lose, so I'd make him a favourite in my mind, but he could genuinely lose, he's going to want 15, 20, but he's not going to get. So that fight's never going to happen. And that's and that's the problem. They get overpaid for fights that are not worth the money. But if I was boxing today and I was a marketable fighter, I'd be exactly the same as them. Because we're selfish. Because it's a selfish sport. Because you have to be like that to do it. Because it's your career and blah, 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 all that crap. But as fans and as the guy who works in the sport, I just care about the sport, not the fighters. I have my favourite fighters who I like to watch more than others. But I mean, I don't get attached to them because of this. I care for the sport, and I don't care what fighters do. I think we're all of us now because of social media and channels like yourself, which are brilliant for access and information. But we get too much information, so we feel like we're involved in negotiations, and we do, don't we? That's the truth. And I think we get and we know the money and with this and that, and we're going, he shouldn't fight him. He's worth more money. We're back in the day, we didn't give a shit. We just cared about the fights. The fights never got made. We just said shame. We didn't think it. We never thought it was down to money. We just thought one guy bottled the other was bottling it. And sometimes that would make the egos would make fighters fight each other because they didn't want to seem like they were scared. No, the excuse is the money's not there. But the problem is boxing is a great sport, but all we do is slag it off. Look, I've just spent 10 minutes now slagging it off, and I love it. It's the easiest thing to do, isn't it? And I slag other people off who slag the sport off because I don't think they're proper boxing fans. But then I do the same thing. But like I said, let's focus on the good stuff, and there's some great fights, and I think Haney and Lomachenko is a fantastic fight. Garcia and Tank is maybe a better fight.
Taylor Lopez as well.
Taylor Lopez in June. I was working with Josh on the radio last week for the Cody's fight. Enough said about that, the better. But yeah, and he's bang up for it. He looked lean and thin, to be fair. And obviously, Jack Castle just signed with Eddie Hearn today. I think it was today, yep. at the weigh-in. That means that fight's never going to happen. But it probably wasn't going to happen anyway. So I sort of feel for Jack Castle a little bit. But he'll get Regis Prograis probably, something like that. And is he now the new WBC champion? I think. He just beat Ramirez, didn't he? Yeah. So no, that's a great fight. It's a great fight. He gets opportunities now, and that's good for him. Could he be sat on the sideline since that really bad decision? Josh Taylor is my favourite British fighter, but he never won that fight, unfortunately. It's not his fault. It's not his fault. He just in there trying to win.
He's not a judge.
He's not a judge, no, and none of the judges by the looks of it. But it was a bad night for British boxing because the right guy didn't win the fight. But I think it's a great division. That's a great fight. Him and Teofimo Lopez in New York in June in the heat. I'm all for that.
There'll definitely be some fireworks during fight week, wouldn't there?
Oh, unbelievable! It'd just be fantastic, wouldn't it? You just think and just the build up. It'd just be because obviously Teofimo Lopez's dad's a raving lunatic, which is great. Joe McNally, who's quite unassuming, but apparently I don't know him very well. He doesn't take any nonsense. End this now because Michael Collins just walked in. Grab him.
All right. Barry Jones, passionate as ever. Thank you for your time.
See you, mate.